Hello, Marissa Rose Aulick here. Well, in 2014, I had a vision I am convinced was from God to encourage parents and mentors to be intentional in raising the next generation. There was one catch though. I was just 3 years into teaching and nearly 2 years into motherhood myself. And yet, 30 years into life, my own life. Reflecting on my life, particularly my upbringing, I realized how intentionality would have served us well in many ways. Intentionality in what was spoken to us and what was modeled before us. Intentional vision for the people we would become and the godly lives we could one day run. Years later, as an adult educator, I wanted to be different, to model differently. My consistent mantra became in the future, suggesting that what I'm teaching now is to intentionally serve your later. Sure, I taught minds reading, writing, and social sciences, but I also reached young hearts through compassion, character, and community building lessons for nearly a decade in the brick and mortar, before officially resigning in February 2020 to rest and serve my family best. Right before the pandemic, mind you. Oh, talk about timing. Later, I would come to realize that resigning was my chance to begin to flesh out that 2014 vision, I Am, which stands for Intentional Active Mentors and Parents. It began as a YouTube channel and now a private Facebook I Am fam group representing about 50 families. We need parents and mentors to serve pivotal roles to help refine the next generation's gold, to help them break out of destructive, even cultural molds, raise them to rise. I Am was conceived in 2014, an embryo, you could say. I never knew what would become of my dream until I officially resigned as a brick and mortar teacher years later to nurture them and to nurture this. It would take years as a parent, teacher, now mother of 3, to realize that I Am wasn't just a mission to encourage, equip, and empower them, but to first encourage, equip, and empower me intentionally. Me who lacked the nurturing and the protection, provision, and affirming presence of parents. Me who saw firsthand how in the void of an intentional voice, a young person is more apt to heed Satan's lying noise. Now, as a mother, I would need to allow my Heavenly Father to encourage me, equip me, and empower me to parent intentionally by first shepherding me Himself. I strongly believe that God gave me the I Am vision because of my humble beginning. He wanted to partner with a humbled vessel to display His strength in helping me to rise, because He knew that if I would choose to see myself through His eyes, I would help others do the same. As I live up to my middle name, Marissa Rose. Marissa Rose so others could rise. I've been through it. And for His reasons, God chose me for this vision, to grow through it, so I could sow through it as I humbly share about my fall and then step out of my proverbial boat into this divine call. I've watched the news. There were and perhaps still are in certain areas an uproar about things being taught in various schools and libraries, things young people are being exposed to even from school library books, TV, peers. As an educator, I knew the influence I had on my young students, The influence I knew should be garnered most by intentional, active parents from home. It takes a village. Yes, I'd agree. But in the best scenario, parents lead their children's village best. But back to the uproar. I believe parents were in an uproar because they believed their children were intentionally being led astray from what they considered the right ways. They believed all the more that intentionality is needed, but dare I say, not just to raise one's voice at a school board meeting, but also to be a pivotal voice and influence in our own children's lives, to take on our God-given role to help our own children to rise. So Risen Jen, that's where it comes in. It's because I see a risen generation. It's an extension of my intentional, active mentors and parents I AMP initiative. But it's more than a clothing line. Intentionality is etched into every inspiring word and unique design. Each piece has intentional purpose to pour into our precious youth and young adults truth of identity towards their God-driven destiny. All with the aim to help them see themselves through God's eyes and us partnering with God in raising them, you guessed it, to rise. Without vision, the people perish. Or in our case, as parents and mentors, we cast off restraint in how we talk and actively walk. So the vision is simple. I see a risen generation that is raised intentionally to rise. They will wear stylish tees that speak to who we see when we look into their eyes. A generation that will rise above lies of who they are, whose they are, and what they are born to do. We see a risen gen, past tense, because like Jesus, we can have vision for the bundles of joy set before us, too. We see who they are, but also who they will become. So we intentionally raise a generation of truth-led daughters and sons. Risen Gen clothing would not only remind us of our amazing role as intentional, active mentors and parents, but it will serve as a reminder to our youth and young adults of the intentional talk and active walk we invest into them as they rise. So they rise. But that's not all. Partnering with other organizations, starting with Her Hope, Kentucky, a transitional in-house ministry program for those coming out of childhood trauma, sex trafficking, prostitution, and substance abuse. 10% of Risen Gen quarterly proceeds will go towards furthering the mission of organizations and businesses who intentionally and actively invest in youth, young adults, and by faith, the adults who will raise the next generation to rise. Rise, again, because we see a risen gen when we look into their eyes. So this is my invitation. Pick up a Risen Gen tee as inspiration to engage in intentional conversation with a generation we intentionally and actively raise to rise. Sign up to our email list to receive newsletters, updates, and Risen Gen resources associated with each unique tee. Sign up so you don't miss a Risen Gen beat. It's where intentional, active mentors and parents and a generation raised to rise intentionally and actively meet. Thank you. Purchase a tee, support the cause, and support other businesses and organizations who are raising a generation to rise.